I am muted. That's an embarrassing way to start the show. But hello, everyone. Welcome to the 25th annual Sister Spit Tour. We are so excited to have you with us this evening. We have an incredible lineup of artists and activists and poets and writers and folks of all disciplines to offer their literary offerings, their wit, their humor, their glamour, everything under the sun. Just to kick you off, I will introduce myself, tell you a little bit about what our org is, and what we're here to present for you. And then we'll get started with the show. We are thrilled you could join us this evening and excited that even though we couldn't actually make it up to Portland, that we were still able to pull this show off. And we have to shout out PCC and the Multicultural Center, the Queer Resource Center, and things like that for making this possible. This honestly would not be happening without the collaboration and the kinship they've offered us throughout this really interesting time for arts orgs in California. So just a little bit about what we do. So Radar is a nonprofit literary arts organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We support queer and trans, Black, Indigenous artists of color by producing and developing and presenting innovative, scholarly, and creative work. We've been around since 2003, and we serve a regional community, which includes the Pacific Northwest, of artists with a specific focus around 2015 on artists of color. For 25 years now, we've actually been on the road with this tour. And for a lot of them, we have enjoyed our time in Portland. And so we are actually really, really sad. A lot of us look back on our Portland stops super fondly. We're sad we couldn't be there. But at the end, we have some trivia questions that involve some Portland-specific prizes. So even though we couldn't come in person, we still have gifts for you as if we were in person. Some gift certificates from local merchants in Portland that we have connections with or built connections with during the years we've been touring. So what we do and why we do this work and why we're here. We like to draw from the legacies of our queer and trans ancestors and the living legends. Our programs like this and our tour offer and empower audiences to work with all of their innate cultivated gifts to challenge mainstream beliefs and to continue to redefine queer culture, feminism, race, class, access, and equity. During the COVID pandemic, we have especially realized that it is imperative for us to present pop-up, pandemic safer performances online for those who are housebound as a result of either their immigration status, their immunocompromised status like myself, disability status, neurodiversity, or even loss of income or housing due to the closures of schools and small businesses and things like that. So the reason we do this work is to envision a reality where we work within existing resources to thrive. And that's what we're here to do tonight. We do this work in honor of some people who I will now share with you. If you could bring that up. These are some of the reasons we do the work we do. These are some of our queer ancestors, our trans ancestors, and people who mean a lot to our organization and us as artists. I'll tell you a little bit about them before we get on with our show and then get straight to things. We've got Jack Garland, who is a transmasculine, white and Latinx trans man who lived unfettered a trans man life. He lived, worked, acted as a man, as a journalist, and actually covered the Philippine War and was eventually found out not to be born assigned male at birth. But everyone on the ship that he had stowed away on essentially loved him so much that he was allowed to stay. So he came back and wrote, had an insider scoop that no other journalist had because he was so beloved by the sailors, and was able to come back to San Francisco and report on the war. Next to him, we have Ella Zaraya, who was a Swana trans feminine person in San Francisco who performed really intense equestrian stunts and kind of cabaret performances. She was often incarcerated for doing these things and not wearing the appropriate gender clothing, but we bring her spirit of glamour and doing and saying and wearing whatever the heck you feel and showcasing your magic. We've also got Monica Roberts, who is a trans griot, author, activist, and recent ancestor of ours. And we raise up her name because without her, this work would not be possible. We've also got Gwen Arajo, who is actually loosely involved in the San Francisco community, the queer community, before her unfortunate death at the hands and the result of transmisogynistic violence. We also offer space and time for Marcel Cook Daniels, who is a trans masculine person, who is a Black trans man, who is imperative in creating new regulations and safety nets for people struggling with mental illness or neurodiversity in the queer and trans community. He unfortunately was failed by our systems, but during his short time on this earth was able to open the doors for us to do this work. We've got Felicia Flames, who is a San Francisco icon. She was a part of the Compton's cafeteria riots, which actually predate the Stonewall riots. They were San Francisco's version of Stonewall. She actually used to attend a lot of Radar events and always kind of stuck by us and really helped us bridge an intergenerational gap that we were lacking at some point. She helped us kind of connect with our queer and trans ancestors who had been there and created the history for us to do this literary work. And then lastly, we have Lucy Hicks Anderson, who is actually the godmother of gay marriage. She is a trans woman who was born in Katy, Texas, actually, but moved out here and transitioned as a youth. We bring her in solidarity with our trans youth who are right now battling some of the strictest and the most harshest, terrible laws that have been passed in, well, maybe ever. And Lucy fought to autonomously identify as she wanted as a teenager and went on to marry a man and was legally living her life to her best and greatest pleasure until she was accused of impersonating a woman and went through a whole legal battle. So I uplift those names and I'll be back a little bit later before my reading to talk a little bit more about the history of why we do what we do. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first artist. We have Mia Willis coming to the stage with us. Mia is a Black performance poet from Charlotte, North Carolina. Their work, twice nominated for the Pushcart Prize, has been featured by Palette Poetry, The Offing, the Minnesota Review, Homoology Lit, Narrative Northeast, Slamfine, and others. In 2019, Mia was named a Lambda Literary Fellow in Poetry, the Young Artist Fellow at Kasahama's Cha North residency, I might be butchering that name, my apologies, and a collaborator in Forward Together's Trans Day of Resilience art project. They are a two-time Best of the Net nominee. Mia is also the author of Monster House from Jaya Books, the 2018 winner of the Cave Canem Foundation's Toy Dairy Coet and Cornelius Eady Chapbook Prize, and their debut full-length poetry collection is forthcoming. Let's welcome Mia to the stage. You can connect with them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Poet in the Hat. I'll put that in the chat so you can follow them because you will want to after they perform for y'all. Here we go. Let's come to the stage, Mia.
Yo, big ups, Mason. Big ups to everybody at PCC, everybody who is watching. My name is Mia S. Willis. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm coming to you from unceded Muskogee Creek territory in Atlanta, Georgia. Let's read some poems if y'all are down. I'm going to read some poems. Mere days after we paid our respects to Chairman Fred, we sat on the stoop slack-jawed as a man ate a $120,000 banana. Sucked our teeth and mused that the hunger's gonna kill us first. 60-second science class in the self-checkout. Appetite, like energy, cannot be lost, only change its form, so when my stomach, pockets, are empty, I bite the Armani-gloved hand that feeds me. Question. If the ancestors were sharecroppers living in Eden on credit, what was the price of the apple? Question. If we still have not tired of tilling the fields without tasting the fruit, what is the value of our heads? In the year of our Lord 2019, Jesus walked into a brightly colored spectacle, peeled forbidden yield, let teeth break skin into bleeding, performed a miracle, then smiled as centurions led him away from shocked public. Peace so still, it shows the cruelty in starving, commands its witnesses to go forth, multiply. Y'all, that poem is about living in Florida. If you have seen me before, if you have seen me do shows before, you know that I spent a lot of my life in Florida. A lot. It was only like 2 years. Funny. But I was living in Florida in 2019 when David DeTuna, a performance artist, went to Art Basel Miami and removed that banana that was taped to the wall and valued at $120,000 from the wall and ate it. And that poem is my ode to the hungry artist. I always open my sets with that. It's one of my favorites. But this is Resplendent. It's very queer. There's like opportunity for me to talk about gender. Monica, you're so right. 2 years in Florida is forever. You're so right. But this is an opportunity for us to talk about gender. And so I do have a couple poems about that, if y'all don't mind hanging through. So I am an archaeologist by training. I went to school for archaeology, particularly Roman archaeology. And so because of that, I'm really fascinated by the way that people learn words and use words to make culture. Imagine that, me, a poet. And so I'm going to share this next poem with you. It's called A Descriptive Grammar About Gender. A. Boy, B-O-Y, and boy, B-O-I, are homophones, distinguishable only by their context. Example, police officer to my father, where are you coming from, boy? Example, lover's hand to my cheek, where are you coming from, boy? B, the sequence of sounds trans is both a prefix and an adjective that appears before the word it describes. Example, the Swahili name for the transatlantic slave trade is the Maafa, the catastrophe. Example, there is no Swahili word for transgender. There was no need to name the sources of the salt in the seawater before the catastrophe. C, femme, F-E-M-M-E, and femme, F-E-M, are homophones, distinguishable only by their context. Example, diamonds are a femme's best friend. Example, my femme is a home for the bloodiest hands, for those eager to test their strength against the diamond and the rough that refuses to give her up. D, lexical semantics demonstrate that body and gender are historically synonymous. Example, this is my body, which is given for you. Example, for my gender is true food. Y'all, I don't know if you can tell, but I grew up in the South and I grew up in the church. And so much of what I have come to know about myself has been conditioned by those two experiences. So much of what I have come to know about my gender has been conditioned by my understanding of what it is to be holy in the South and what it is to take care of people. I always talk about where I come from in all the sets. People are never confused. And I always like to talk about my family in the sets too. I'm going to do a poem about my family if y'all are cool with that. And then I'll close it out because I want to hear these other amazing voices. Parable for the hidden treasure. An aubade for those who are always rising. On the days my sister's memory is an atrophied muscle, a sax player resurrects the darkest light sample. Husks, show me what you got, becomes the pot howling hymns at the kettle on the queue to Church Avenue. Family honey roasts me over woolen plats in a black girl's kitchen. Stove hot, tongues sorrel sour, Kanikelon viands to emaciated hearts, meta passes through dat meditation, and none of us are tender-headed here. On the days my sister's empathy hangs thick, crab boil steam clouds Ashley's windows. Asia laughs under trees in a Prospect Park sun shower, superb and inevitable. Fire envelops the tip of a blunt rolled with lavender, the grandest branching only complemented by heat. We two-step across the floor in Maya's living room. Transformed in overripe melody, a trap motet with mass strings, movement one. I forgive her for singing to me in voices not her own. Thank her for the music anyway. On the days my sister's rings are trophies from a living made by hunting, commerce at an end, the green lines sinking into the ocean, movement two. I forgive myself for marking the change in her tale's narrator. Thank her for lingering to listen anyway. Resplendent, I always enjoy reading poems for you. I always enjoy reading poems for you, Portland. And so I'm going to just close with this last piece. It was one of the newer ones that I wrote in 2020, and it's a tattered flag poem. It's on Palette Poetry if you want to check it out. But this last poem is called Juneteenth. It was written on Juneteenth, and it's written in honor of the Juneteenth and Republic of New Africa flags. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you at the conclusion. The man asks, "What do you know about freedom?" So I tell him how I came out to my grandmother. Say, "I am more intriguing than the violence done to me." Or, I am more intriguing than the violence done to me. Then I tell him how I wish I could be more honest with my mother about my credit history. Knock, knock on that. Or anything that means anything at all. And I explain how I talk about my father more than I talk to him, because what surprise could a raindrop ever bring the ocean? And I explain how I never wonder if my partner loves me when there are biscuits in the house. Only when the man turns to walk away do I approach the truth, is that I was born under a North Carolina wind bloated with acid, where women forge brave lacquered armor of constraint, scabbards full of toil, slack and useless simplicity clearing loose soil from the excavation, blood spent so lavishly on an empty landscape in my house, in my mother's house, in my mother's mother's house, a slapdash driftwood body, Charybdis waves, guileful, tempestuous. I taught myself to read the gusts by pricking my ears to their howl. Thus far, the only transliteration that fills this sail of billowing skin. When I say all the Black people here are smiling, I mean humans are the only species for which showing teeth is a sign of benevolence. I mean, ain't it funny how enamel ain't bulletproof, but we crouch behind it anyway? When I say all the Black folks here are smiling, I mean all the Black folks here are alive and as soft as water and eager to stay. Thank you, Resplendent. Thank you, Mason. Thank you to all the other artists. This has been such a treat and a gift. I really, really always appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for Mia, for blessing us with these words, your time, especially on the East Coast. Yes, 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 yes. And that's why we do this. That's why we, whether it's digitally or in person, come and show you what we're up to, tell you about our stories, our histories, our lineages, in order to empower ourselves and to continue to kind of move this train forward of queer, Black, trans, brown, lit, and all the things we are doing. Now I guess it's time for me to introduce our second reader. Up second, we have Nefertiti Asante. Nefertiti is a poet born and raised in the Bronx and a recipient of fellowships and residencies from Watering Hole, Emergent NYC, the Lambda Literary Arts, Anaphora Arts, Winter Tangerine, and the Hurston Wright Foundation. Nefertiti is a 2021 PEN America Emerging Voices Fellow, and they currently serve as the prose editor of Stellium Literary Magazine. Nefertiti is also the winner of our Start a Riot chapbook competition and a former participant in our Show Us Your Spines residency. They never disappoint with their work. I cannot wait to hear what they have to share with us this evening, and I'd like to bring them to the stage now. So everybody, Nefertiti Asante.
Hello. That was such a very full and generous description of me. I feel really good to be here. I don't know what to say beyond thank you in this moment. Not really sure what order I'm gonna poem in, but I'm just gonna feel through it. Let's see what do I feel inspired to say in this moment. I'll start with this piece, Ars Poetica, Grandma Tell Me. I'll give, I guess, like background about this piece after. Ars Poetica. Grandma, tell me, where does the lyric begin? One syllable at a time. When you relearn language, is the tongue too heavy? Does it all come creeping back to scale itself? Does your sister come when you cuss in your sleep? Do you sing like little girls who still have a mother? Does she clean scuffs to make shiny black faces and patent leather shoes? Does your husband come alive, dancing, drunk, and still angry? Do you ever leave the country, ever leave your body and your voice returns? Before you become mother to somebody's mother, do you ever feel grand and keep secrets? Grandma, tell me, what secrets keep you? Tell me, does your heaven smell like sugar and bleach? So that particular piece I wrote before my grandmother joined the ancestors. And so I'm here alone in my apartment, and it felt good to be able to invoke her tenacious, dutiful spirit while I am here with y'all today. So, or tonight, because it's night now. So I'll read some pieces from my manuscript in progress called The Present is a Small Child. That one was also a part of the manuscript. This piece is called The Present is an Adolescent with 3 Wishes. I'm rubbing and rubbing and rubbing my tummy like it's a magic lamp, like a swole blue genie fitting to uncurl and a smoke trail clear out my vagina and lay 3 wishes on me. I'd wish for a new tummy, less swollen with not babies, not flat neither. I could set it down on my side table, soft and doughy like the memory foam pillow at my back, propping me up so I can swallow oatmeal, still warm in my mouth. Maybe a second wish would be a second mouth on the quickest side of my cheek, smiling when I am not smiling, spitting like a real monster would spit on doctors that don't know what the freak they doing. I most love me when I'm dipping my fingers in the paint I make each month vermilion. When I say it, feel like I got caterpillars crawling between my teeth. Swear they building cocoons. I am careful not to chew and swallow them too. Pills, water, oatmeal, tongue, eddy in my mouth. My second mouth recites picture book poems in the silence between procedures. I ain't bled in such a long time. I miss it. When my butterfly baby comes out her cocoon, I make my third wish that BB taps her little feet on my nose, kiss my second mouth, then flutter away to a good mommy who voice make dandelions dance in a land where you don't need wishes. I say vermilion. My blood would come like silk and Zuby wrapped me in a Sailor Moon cocoon, so no one, not even God, could touch me. Um, that piece is inspired by ideas around teen pregnancy and being Black, being hood, being experimented on, being beastly, ghastly, but being human and whole and having agency. Another piece. Okay, since I mentioned menses and periods, I'll share this piece called Menses Sings of Me. Did I ever tell you about the time you wanted me? You had to be no bigger than a minute, Eyes bright yolks of sunlight in June time, only seen the light brightest stars in your eyes shining down on me. Womb born, raised in a deep, sweet darkness, wet with the breath of soon come and iron every day of fifth grade. You wish for a Barbie dream house, fried chicken for dinner, your long-legged daddy, and me. And I'm the only thing ever came to stay. You told everyone about me, said my name careful, not quiet, like swallowing honey the first time, every time. Like we was old friends. And I was the only promise your body ever kept. You don't like to keep secrets. But I built and stained your seat at the kitchen table, got the splinters to prove it. And all I want is to slip between the next sharp shout and taut exhale to singe the splinters out of us. Okay. I guess I'll do I guess I'll do one from Fist of Wind, actually. Fist of Wind is the chapbook that this one is worn. It's had a lot of time with me here. But this is the chapbook that with Starter Riot, and I'm just very excited to, well, 5-year-old me is very excited to have a book with my name on it in my hands. So I'll read this piece. I have always had my hands, even when there was no field, no heads, no feathered things to tend. Had hands that knew tender, swelled in front of the throat when neck give reach, sun in itself drinking up the light, dancing hands taking a fistful of skirt and lift and lift and lift, high stepping over newly planted tomatoes, corn, or like if I squat over an unfamiliar plot, I'll push out a funny looking seed and will a thing to grow and grow, whether or not I take myself past the Mason Dixon without that seed. I still got hands. Grateful to hold open a door for a pretty sateen thing passing through my eyes, smile at the ground, hoping a mistake will grow into a future where my hand rests on the small of that passing through pretty thing's back. Ooh, where my hands rest on the small of that passing through pretty thing's back, and her lips touch the lip of my wine glass, and her lips touch the lip of the wine glass my lip touched, and the clean of the glass shine in competition with the shine of my teeth. Half moon in my mouth ain't too shy to present its telltale self here. We do not shake hands like resting, hanging fruit from the good neighbor's tree. When these hands slow strangled a bass, when these hands slow strangled the long neck of a used bass, the sound come out never came out again. The music changed, mostly changed me. Gave me round breasts anybody could mistake for clementines, gave me lips too full to fit on my face only, so I found another and another. Gave me eyes too squint and narrow to not never seem suspicious of kids sitting too quiet in the back of class, or a man scuffed everywhere but his shoes, or a river warmer than the air above it, and the music changed. My hands made it so my fists could fit into a swallow's mouth, clench and unclench without breaking the beak. Okay, that will be my last one. I really appreciate this time, this virtual time with you all. And I'm excited to see the rest of the show. Thank you.
Alrighty, what did I tell you? Y'all were in for a treat with that. Thank you so much, Nefertiti, for joining us. Like I said, it's always a pleasure and a privilege to hear what work comes out of the pandemic and what work we're allowed to kind of create as all these things coalesce and we kind of bumble through whatever is going on this rocky little world we're floating through space on. So speaking of floating through space and glamour. This is a reference to their background. You'll see it in a second. Up next, we have Dena Rod. Dena is a queer Iranian-American poet and essayist whose focuses on illuminating their diasporic experiences. Described by the bold italic as a verbose advocate, their first poetry collection, Scattered Ariels, is available from Milk and Cake Press. You can connect with Dena on his website at denarod.com. And let's welcome Dena to the stage, everyone.
Thank you, Mason. And thank you so much, PCC, for having us. I remember being on tour and this being one of my favorite stops. And it's a true pleasure to be able to return to the stage here. I have some new poems for you. We'll have a little bit of grief, a little bit about the pandemic, and a whole lot of queer rage. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is Dining by Curbside. We crave generous spaces to press our bodies against each other and have our cocktails overflow with real American cherries. Yet new currents upgrade us into a purple tear. We are commanded to peel ourselves out of the booth, yet still we drink deeply from leaking fluted glasses, perched upon chairs treading water, compelling us to cross our legs, ask the waiter for another newly pressed napkin, a bold action to sop up gratefully accepted gifts below. Yet all I see are corpses, filling deep grates covered in large plains, weighted by the expectation of each generation. Ones who can no longer plan futures or find places of belonging, or encourage courageous action from our children. And then we all presume shock when some named action appears. This next one is called To the Middle East Market. Chimes announced our arrival. Stepping over the threshold might as well have been stepping into a pocket, with each aisle stacked high with goods I knew only whispers about. Each supplied a reason or meaning that couldn't be found elsewhere. Soft bread baked over hot stones, thick jars of whey, tart as the white bricks of neighboring feta, canned, fluorescent, chubby green pickles brimming with brine, sour enough to make your eyes sweat. You'd see fresh walnuts still in their shells, baklava soaked in honey syrup, nestled in ruffles, fine marjoram, dried angelica, wrapped and brushed into waiting against your elbows. Each step brings us closer to where we came from, that inhaled fragrance unlike anything else. We'd get threads of saffron tucked away behind the counter, wheat's germ to sprout for the new year, every year. Maybe it wasn't owned by someone who called the same place motherland, but it was closer than the white suburbs we wrapped ourselves into. I feel like children of the diaspora always have a really fond connection to wherever they're able to get their diasporic groceries. I'm thinking of Michelle Zauner's book, Crying in H Mart, specifically about how common that experience is across cultures in America that immigrated here. As a child of the diaspora, I haven't been able to learn how to read or write Farsi to my satisfaction, and this poem addresses that conundrum. Is this my name? I text my dad, is this my name? That is my name in Farsi. I cribbed from Wikipedia because my namesake mountain is the first result, but of course not on Google. I text my dad, is this my name? Because I never learned. We gave up on that spiral bound blue notebook decades ago. It never sunk in. And I text my dad, is this my name? Because I don't want to be one of those Americans with a mistranslation on their body. Yes, he texts, this is your name, right to left. He texts, this is your last name. He texts, here is your mother's name. He texts, your father's name. That means his. And he texts, here is the name of your father's country, which means that this one isn't his. Like the third party keyboard hack I know he's using to tell me our names because Apple doesn't sanction our language in their iOS. I wonder, how much longer can he translate for me? One day he won't be there to tell me where we come from. But until then, I text my dad. Remembrance. I wrote this poem on Transgender Day of Remembrance this last year in response to how my mother reacted to my top surgery. Remembrance. My mother asks, Sinata Amal Kardi, did you get surgery on your chest? And I know what she's really asking is why, because she can already tell what shapes are not there anymore. Awareness, this question bring me, besides more scrutiny, to what my bones have written on them, etched in the womb. Every year, the list of our names gets longer and lives' cords are cut shorter, killed by those who love yet fear us, despite trying worth it. But fear asks, will you care? If I am not performing the body of queer trauma, of what was done to this body, what am I besides feeding tongues in hungry mouths? And yet I am so hungry for what you have, for sharp plains eschewing softness that traverses my body, my leaves unfurling. How does the space my body take become a lie? I could answer, I feel like I have done everything you have asked of me within reason, folded myself into a cornerless thing, no sharp edges to bump against to harm yourself. And yet it is still not enough. The way I am is abrasive to your sense of self. And I guess that's why we don't talk, because you would say that it's me. I'm the problem, that I need to predict the rules of what runs this household, changing on a dime, the truth becoming something malleable, fluid, what suited you best, and myself a tribute offering on the altar of what rotted there. My rot, the problem. My rot, resulting from lack. So much lack, where there was nothing to enter but fester. I am trying to be someone who you want to know, but I don't need to be, because we are divine, our blood sacred, and that's why you want to drink it so badly. Are you aware? I think you are, with each body sling. My mother asks, Sinata amal kardi? Did you get surgery on your chest? And I know what she's really asking is, how? How could you do that to me? Despite being trans, I'm incredibly femme, if you couldn't tell. And I've just decided to lean into what I feel is, a particularly drag aesthetic without shame. It's been quite freeing. And this next poem is called An Ode to Femmes. Salt breaks mascara swiped like spidery lines over and over until they reach the arc of darkened eyebrows. Tears dripped down my face. I dragged myself as I called for love, speaking red lipstick nothings to get what I want against shining teeth. A sharp miracle still denied again. Don't expect diamonds to fall down my shoulders into my palms while the perfect twerk doesn't shake anything that shouldn't. I belong to the kinship of burning your neck on a curling iron, searing skin with a hot syrup of wax, razor bumps peppering where hips crease thighs, gluing fur to lashes. Bathed in buttery light, looked upon as we adorn and drape what's seen as unneeded. That unset altar never worshipped into a knot of fire. Wiping away a tear with a peacock feather, we spit pearls of wisdom, yet no one is holding their hands out with a needle and thread to sew them into a necklace. I have two more poems left for you tonight. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true pleasure to be back in community with you, PCC. It's a really special place, Portland, and it always holds a really sacred place in my heart. This poem is called Dear Faith in White People. I don't know why I keep coming back to you like an abandoned dog looking for another owner that won't kick its ribs inside. Why I keep trying to see the best in you despite all the things you refuse to see. How you bend your back over and you pull out knots of your flesh to show me how much you're bleeding. But there's a wound on this ground that has never closed. It's festered into an ooze that never crusted over. The earth's skin hasn't produced shining new layers to cover and close this wound because we keep pouring white salt into its open mouth. Where does it begin? When you see knots of flesh that haven't really ever been your own, but again, against knowing where and how much it takes for you to pull your body over the border into civility. And I don't want your water, blood, tears, or otherwise to quench my thirst. I just want to be able to pull my own flesh into my hands, show you what has sunk into me without ever even asking for it. What I never needed and what I am still trying to dig out like the shell of a tick that once climbed into the foxhole of a pore that's been there since age 12. And yet, I still want to rehabilitate you, keep you in my life for the next 3 decades until we both have cracks in our smiles etched in, once uncreased into the youth we carried into our faces. Direct your path so it locks steps into mine, so I don't have to leave you behind into the next journey I am taking. Where does your path lead if I don't bring you with me? All I keep coming up are with cliches and rage, neither of which are very effective to bring you into where I want you to be. Because that's what it is. I want you to be better. And you just keep circling into yourself without ever looking up, throwing another and another hand up that just serves to keep the dirt on your back creeping for how. strength, maybe, into a new realm. This last poem is called Grief. She stands in front of me, wearing gray, cobwebbed from stillness, despite how she moves through me daily. I try to spin appreciation from a distance, yet she greets me with my morning cup as she drapes arms across my shoulders. Sorrow's embrace, my all hours companion, no matter time of day. Over the years, she's grown airy and delicate but gossamer gowned. She still sticks to me. That deep anguish turned familiar, watching as I dress, slip my ring on, declaring our matrimony. She slips her loafers on, and after all, we have places to go. Thank you so much, Portland. My name is Denna Rod. You can connect with me on my website, dennarod.com, and check out my book, Scattered Arrows from Milk and Cake Press. Thank you.
Absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much, Jenna. That was a balm I didn't know I needed for not only my heart, but just my eyes, everything. Even with the glitches, it was interesting. It was almost as if we were getting a real-time edit of some of the poems. Next up, we have Baruch Porras Hernandez, which is also one of my favorite names to say. Hi, Baruch. So let me get this up here. Sorry. I was trying to troubleshoot the internet connectivity issues that we were having with our last reader, and I lost the bios. And we're back. Sorry about that. So Baruch Porras Hernandez has been called a multi-hyphenated artist, daring, candid, and inventive by the SF Chronicle. But Baruch's also a writer, a performer, a stand-up comedian who has performed all over the country. And when I say performed, I mean that literally and figuratively. He is the author of I Miss You Delicate and Lovers of the Deep Fried Circle. He has been published in several journals and anthologies and has performed his sold-out shows all over San Francisco, where he lives, eats donuts, and makes out with strange men. Everyone, welcome Baruch Porras Hernandez to the stage.
Thank you so much, Mason. And hello, everyone. Like Mason said, my name is Baruch Porras Hernandez, if you speak Spanish. If you don't, it's okay. It's also Baruch Porras Hernandez. Very easy to pronounce, very easy to remember. I am so honored to be here and very thankful to Radar and Mason and the poets that I've read tonight who I was like, please don't make me cry. I'm wearing makeup. I don't want to cry before my performance, which I'm going to start right now. Thank you so much for being here. Here we go. My first poem you can find in my book, I Miss You Delicate, which you can buy. And please do, because I'm poor and I live in the most expensive city in the country. All right. It is titled Resting Gently on Her Unibrow. She had several self-portraits in which she painted an object on her forehead. If it was a small painting of her husband, the portrait would be titled Thinking of Diego. If it was a small image of a skull on her forehead, the portrait would be titled Thinking of Death. Oh, Frida, if only I could live as a small painting on your forehead, resting gently on your unibrow like this, with a small painting on my forehead of a donut. The painting would be titled Frida Kahlo, Thinking of Baruch Porras Hernandez, Thinking of a Donut. And on top of the donut, where its little donut forehead would be, between the sprinkles, another painting of Frida Kahlo. And on her forehead, another painting of me. And on my forehead, another painting of a donut. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on, and forever, and forever, and forever, and forever, and forever. The end. That was my first poem. Again, it's found in one of my little poetry collections or chapbooks. I say poetry collections because when I tell people that don't know what the poetry world is, that I have 2 chapbooks, they start asking me about chapsticks. And that's why I'm like, I have 2 small poetry collections. Please buy them because I'm so poor. All right. I'm going to move on to my next piece. This is sort of new. I wrote it during the pandemic. I hope you like it. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. Por favor, perdóname. It is titled Tips on How to Survive a Pandemic. Tip number 1, go for a walk once a day. Try to be around trees. Tip number 2, try not to think about ghosts. Don't do it. Don't think about ghosts. Don't think about the over 600,000 new ghosts walking around, wondering what the fuck happened. Over 600,000 new ghost voices asking why. New ghosts crowding into boarded up empty San Francisco businesses and bars, sitting in empty movie theaters. Play some music for these new ghosts. Pour them a drink. Put out your hand to the air to maybe touch a ghostly hand or get a ghost high five from someone who misses touching someone as much as you do. Light a candle for these new ghosts. Speak the words, I'm sorry, in the dark, even though you did what you could. You stayed inside, you wore your mask, you washed your hands. Let Netflix play on a loop as you clean your room so the new ghosts have something to watch. Another tip, let yourself cry as much as your body needs you to. Another tip, don't forget to hydrate. Call a friend once a day, even if you run out of things to talk about. Try talking about the best positions to cry in despair, like on the floor, against a wall, in the bathroom, or stick to the classics. Lie down and be depressed on your own actual bed. It works. Wear your mask, wash your hands, call your mom, write letters, video chat your friends. Think about, hopefully, someday you will all be together in the same room again, not wearing masks, possibly enjoying a literary show. It may get rough. It will get rough, but we will get through it. Get through it for the people you love. Get through it for the people we've lost. Get through it for you. Another tip, Google how to punch Nazis in the throat, even though you have no upper body strength. Don't think about how you might make it through the worst part of the pandemic and come out completely dismantled, like a gay Mexican Jenga tower that doesn't know how to stack itself back together again, with missing pieces, pants that don't fit, and has completely forgotten how to navigate crowds, emotions, social situations, anxiety, panic attacks. Love. When things start to get a little better, get vaccinated, get boosted, and as soon as you can, gather a room full of vaccinated hot bears and otters and sexy hairy men and get your motherfucking fuck on. Feel hundreds of invisible hands of all the men that we lost in the last pandemic holding your back, caressing your neck as you dive into the pile of naked, vaccinated, either undetectable or on prep, sweaty, nude men kissing and sucking and fucking. Feel the lips of those ghosts blast the sweat on your foreheads as you brace for round 2. Dance in your room alone to a sexy and/or romantic song. It's okay. No one will see you. Close your blinds. Close your curtains. Picture a room full of queer strangers, all dancing together slowly, passionately. See a handsome man across the room. Slowly move towards each other like a musical. Slowly touch each other's hands. Take in the scent of this man as you both begin to dance. Let him press himself against you, even though you don't even know this man's name. Feel his cheek on your cheek. Smile every time each of your ears brush softly together with each dance move, both leading, both following. Close your eyes and let your heart open again. Picture a room in the future where you will let your heart open again and sing. That was my second poem. That second poem ended. Now I'm going to read my, actually, I'm going to read something new. I used to be part of the slam community, and then I got too old. But for those of you poets out there that, like me, discovered slam and love slam, and I was kind of a regular at the Berkeley Slam and the San Francisco Slam back when Mona used to run it. And I always love the tradition of new shit. So I have new shit for y'all. New poems never before read in a show from me, Baruch Porras Hernandez. So here is a new poem. It's new, so if it sucks, I'm sorry. And if it doesn't suck, I meant to not suck. It's titled, Mi madre me llama a las 2 de la mañana. My mother. Baruch. Cuando te digo que reces y que le hables a Dios, I know it bugs you because you say you're an almost atheist. Está bien, está bien. Pero please know, when I tell you to pray to God, I mean talk to your innermost truth, your innermost you, the voice that has been inside of us for generations. Even if it's a void and there is no God, saying good things in your own voice in the most quiet and private and loneliest moments of your life will help you. There could be a God. He may hear you. And if there is no God, well, at least you said some nice things to yourself when you needed it the most. And always remember, cuánto te quiere tu mamá. Me. Thanks, Mom. The end. That's another new piece. I have my last piece right here. Please follow me on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere, because I only have like 2 followers, and it makes me sad every single day. So please don't let this chubby Mexican queer immigrant cry himself to sleep at night. And follow me on Twitter at Baruch is on fire, or on Instagram at Baruch Porras Hernandez. Thank you so much for having me. Here's my last piece. It is titled A Room of One's Own During COVID-19. I guess I should do a trigger warning. A lot of sexual stuff in this next piece, and a lot of jokes that I know sometimes folks might not be prepared for. So if you're not in the mood for sexy stuff, now is your chance to prepare yourself for it, or not. But also, you know, it's still poetry. A lot of people are like, why is he doing jokes at a poetry show? Some of the best poems are funny. Some of the best jokes are poems. So here we go. My piece is titled A Room of One's Own During COVID-19. Thank you for having me, everybody. I missed a lot of things during the pandemic, especially my friends. And so I wrote a poem to them the other day. Here goes. If you've never held your best friend's hand while both on your knees as you each go down on a fat ass D, are you even friends? The answer is no. At one point during the pandemic, my penis was like, could you not touch me for 5 fucking minutes? God! At one point during the pandemic, my penis just started faking it and finishing way too early, like this. But, and I was like, that's it? And he was like, that's it. And I was like, dude, we have like 5 hours left of OnlyFans to go. We're going to support these young men during this pandemic. We got to do our part. At one point in the pandemic, my penis wrote me a slam poem. It was titled 7.5 Tips on How to Survive a Pandemic with a Sad, Fat, Pathetic Piece of Shit named Baruch. That's you. I gave it a 2.4. My therapist the other day said, I think you might be addicted to self-sabotage. I said, I think you're right. We should definitely have sex. My therapist the other day said, Baruch, when you're this depressed and lonely, you shouldn't do drugs. But the other day, when I was depressed and lonely and on drugs, I started thinking, y'all. And then I thought more and more and more, and I got really sad because I started thinking, even if I survive this terrifying corona pandemic, I'm probably gonna die anyway. From all the dicks I'm gonna try to cram into my mouth when this is over at the same time. It might even create a new black hole from the sheer pressure, speed, and strength of my gay lungs, sucking all the dicks towards my slut mouth faster than the speed of light and sound, eventually warping gravity into itself and creating a new black hole and destroying the world. Or I might just go back to being a fat gay guy nobody wants to marry. We'll see. The end. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. Mwah. Buenas noches y que les vaya muy bien.
Thank you, Baruch. I've not been so nostalgic for sucking dick in a really long time. But yes, I guess that brings us to me. Wow, I'm having a moment right now because I'll give you a little backstory. I have been involved with Radar actually since a year into their existence as a company, as a nonprofit organization. And so I remember when I was 16 years old, I said, one day I will be on the tour. And I realized as Baruch was saying his last bits about dick sucking that, oh, it's really happening. And this is the intro. This is the thing that I come after. Literally, baby. The thing I come after is Baruch, dick, and donuts. Of course, 16-year-old me is dying inside. But yeah, so like I said, I guess I'll read my bio now. It's weird to read your own bio, but I'm now running Radar, so that's what's happening. So yes, like I said, I'm the executive Radar Radar Productions director. I've been involved with Radar since 2004, since I was in high school, and I was learning the craft of literature with Michelle T. And I only mention this because programs like Sister Spit are the reason that I'm sitting here today. And that's kind of what I was just a little verklempt and little stumbling over my words is it was actually in Portland at both the PCC show and the PSU show and a Lewis and Clark show, because I went to all three in 2012, that I decided I needed to move home. I actually lived in Portland. I had moved to Portland to kind of pursue this dream of being a photojournalist and a sad transgender poet. Because I wanted to be in the rain, and I'm from San Francisco. And although it rains here, it's not as dramatic as it is in Portland. So as I was sitting there, I realized I wanted to come home and kind of continue my craft. And that led me to where I am today. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I'll tell you a little bit more about me in general. I am a Black and Indigenous historiographer. I am a visual and performing artist. I work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access as a cultural worker, born, raised, multiple times displaced, but still here as one of the 55,000 Black people left in San Francisco, which in real people terms is about 4 to 6%. So I'm still here and still very proud to be a queer San Franciscan, a second generation queer San Franciscan. I am the co-editor of a book that I actually have right here. Some of the poems that are featured in here actually were written, like I said, during my time in Portland. Still Here, San Francisco, which is an anthology and poetry chapbook that I just put out 1 year ago called Crossbones on My Life through Nomadic Press. And in addition to receiving fellowships from Vona Voices, the James C. Hormel LGBTQ Center, doing work at the Portland Q Center, with SMRC, with Basic Rights Oregon. And those are just my Portland days, but also in San Francisco here at the GABLT Historical Society, the San Francisco Public Library with the Transgender Cultural District, and a host of other things, the Bay Area American Two-Spirit Society. I'm all around town. I'm a writer, and I'm honored to be here sharing my work with you. All right, so I'll start this with a disclaimer. I am I'm a girly man. I'm a girly man. I'm a girly, queer, bisexual, whatever you want to call me. But I love bad women. And when I say bad, I don't mean evil. I don't mean nasty. I mean bad girls. I love bad girls. I love to look adoringly at them and rarely touch them. I am an admirer of bad girls. I feel like they're very thorny in a way that appeals to me. And so in the interest of reading new shit, as I am a former slam poet, I am going to start with something pretty new. I've been thinking a lot about blood and things like that, and viral particles and stuff like that. I'm actually an AIDS war veteran. My mom was doing care as an essential worker in the 80s and 90s, caring for men who are dying of AIDS. And so that's even honestly one of the reasons I ended up outside of California going to Portland, was to just even cope with that. As San Francisco was rapidly getting gentrified, it became very clear that things were disappearing and I needed some time to gather myself. And that's how I ended up in Portland, to gather myself and then return home. So this is about, the blood, the fear, the love, the lust that happens, all the things that even Baruch was just talking about. I actually have had coronavirus twice. So I think a lot about what it means to have a body that's actually been disabled since birth, but a body that now has fewer resources and fewer spoons, but more access needs. So this is kind of about that. Intimacy needs that I didn't know were this pressing that I'm now experiencing in a pandemic. Just a little prick. Me, just a little prick. We both know the fear of a razor and how it cuts fuckboy devotees. So let me be your paper cut poppy. Small and mostly unassuming, only felt when necessary, at times anxiety inducing. Conveniently inconvenient reminder of impatience and hastiness. No stitches or scars, for the only way to quickly heal is trust. Trust me with your needy needle and your traumatized threads. I promise I won't stay the Band-Aid's adhesive. Flow. At the risk of reinfection, I do not kiss you, even when I want to, mostly because I love you. But also so you can remember that a love that says I cannot live without you will only lead to a hemorrhage. A love that knows how to create clots of care flows freely forever. This next one is also new. I've been writing a lot of new stuff lately. Nothing like a kind of mental health episode induced by suddenly taking over an organization to make you write as an artist. So this is called Soul Admissions. Safe conflict is possible. Discomfort isn't inherently dangerous. When reflection occurs, we become more powerful than all who seek to oppress us. In every season, steam rises from the rivers, warms the surrounding trees, snow-kissed or lonely and dry. Jaguars shoot across a shoulder, resembling comets. Panthers stalk space debris down a back. Dreams yet to be realized rest on our hips. Floral crowns dancing under the California redwoods. Pineapple, cucumber, apples, cinnamon, nutmeg, figs, honey, and pomegranate. We are stuffing our mouths with chaos, wit, sensuality, perception, innovation, and grief. We kiss with the tenacity of sun gods, walking over ice, using the sacred power of non-gendered courage, polarized emotion, and enhanced focus. Is this prey in the forest, abundance, or something like it? Aligning and following sound and color, inseparable triangulations of the mind, body, and soul, love flowing in and out of reach. All right. This next one is kind of about the work that I do at the James C. Hormel Center and that I did that kind of even got me back into Radar. It's how I came back to Radar, was actually through my work studying queer archives. I am actually an ex-academic. I am a proud Portland Community College dropout. I dropped out of my time at PCC Sylvania to pursue medical transition because I needed to devote my time to that because I was just kind of struggling with an environment that I now know has changed. And I'm so grateful it has changed. But at the time when I was there in 2010 was not suitable for me as a Black queer trans person. So I am so glad that although it is not perfect and likely never will be, it is improved greatly. And trans students have even access to programming like this, which I did not have when I was there. So this was kind of written around that time when I was thinking and coming back to the Bay Area and doing work with archives and figuring out how I could mix my kind of time in academia with a very real world, visceral experience of being low income, disabled, queer, trans in a rapidly gentrifying city. And, literally, figuring out ways to help my childhood friends move their families out of their homes, but also still needing to write and perform and, only getting paid for my trauma. And so this next piece is about kind of me finding and channeling the divine wisdom of my literary ancestors and my queer ancestors that I found in the archives, specifically a Soto saint who is a Black Haitian gay phenom, a multidisciplinary artist who lived until I believe 92 or 94. I'm a little overwhelmed, so I'm blanking on the date, but you can look him up. And so, yeah, and the other person being Audre Lorde. I have found a lot of refuge and safety in their work in all this time throughout dealing with coronavirus myself, like I said twice, and dealing with the world around me, dealing with everything that it means to be not only an artist, but also a healing practitioner and a cultural worker and a queer witch and a bunch of other things. So this is about that. Sorry for that long intro, but I really love to contextualize my work because I feel like it helps you relate to it. Once upon a time, a lifetime ago, but perhaps maybe not, a Soto saint and Audre Lorde requested that we meet in the basement of the San Francisco Public Library. I find the spells of a voodoo doll and sister love Eiffel towered in a threesome between two book holes. I knew I should feel lucky, yet like most of Generation Z, I'm resentful, maybe even dissatisfied. With no living ancestors, only ghosts to perv and cruise on, my generation grew up lost, lustful, and ready to commit theft. When the gay griots appear, there were no wishes to grant. Nary an Afro-Haitian dance, truth or dare game of personal power. Just one request. Little black queen, steal everything your mind can carry. And it seems in this economy of queer commodities, the oracles can only have a few caregivers, so I'm all they've got. Bound in ink, glitter, and spit, a Soto jeans fit tight, but mine fit 2 times as tight. Audre's chronic illness camaraderie keeps me company as I write in the pulmonologist's office, the ER. The immediacy of dying immigrant words in a cancerous chest, then liver, a hit of poppers for my sprightly California soul, tea for my inner black girl, get me through these days fighting capitalism and my nights sleeping alone. Being chosen first is a daunting task that has always been the crossbone of my life. The silence that I refuse to let shield me. Though only 34, I remember the AIDS war, and I've seen my black lesbian ancestors disappear. Velour-wristed mama's boys and trouser-wearing daddy's girls that could not stand the thought of being alone, the same way that they've left me. So they all died together, as if going out for a night on the town and simply just not coming home. Sometimes I visualize them in soap opera-lit versions of heaven, with mink and Aquanet hairspray halos, sweaters made from the feathers of angels, notebooks being filled with shade and camaraderie, records playing, delicacies eaten, reruns of their mourners' parades playing on a loop, just having a faggoty, gay old dykey time. All right, I've got one more for you before I kind of take us into our next little fun kind of Q&A trivia, the more you know segment. I always like to throw a little bit of everything we do at Radar at folks. So I throw in the work that we do, the history and the legacy it comes from, and invite you all to participate in it in various capacities. So this next one, I'm actually going to record because I want a version of this for myself, honestly, because this was written very newly. But I'm excited to share new work with you, so I'm going to do it. All right. So this is called Rage Does Not Equalize, Revive, or Bring Justice, but sometimes it's all we have. I'm going to take off my headphones for this one. Rage does not equalize justice, revive the dead, or bring justice. But sometimes it is all we have. When I think of reunions, I think of my family. Alive and breathing, unlike our ancestors, solely because we have not moved. Many call us stubborn, but isn't that what makes a household? A chosen family, a queer clique, annoying parents, fun uncles, wealthy aunts, and immature siblings. Dysfunctional, hilarious, ride or die, and clever, finding power through words swapped at the dinner table. Refrigerator notes secrets of sweetening corn on the cob by rolling it on buttered rolls. We continue to resist and adapt as the world changes. Offer tender gestures to transform turf wars, joyriding and ghost riding the whip, a cosmic minivan with seats and cup holders for everyone. Down the binary highway, rear-ending every law, red-carding every sports that league that is racist or transphobic, resetting systems, weaving words of opportunity. Our knowledge is sacred. It's solar generated and lunar dream. It is the man with doctrine and technique, women with love and harmony, non-binary and two-spirit people like me, a blended or subtracted infinity. We must embrace and elevate, create intergenerational connections. Beloved homes, despite what the bigots tell you, your patience does not have to tolerate pain. Patience brings a six-pack of delight in consuming and metabolizing, a platter of restraint or hedonism depending on the moon. A hot fudge sundae of learning. The truth is adapting to change. Nothing new to trans people. All we need is to be activated, but cautiously optimistic. All right, so we're going to pivot into the next part of our programming now. Once again, thank you to everyone that has joined us this evening. It has been, even virtually, so fun and so enriching to be here and to feel your energy and to see y'all in the chat and to see these comments. You know, even though we're remote, we don't get much action in terms of seeing our audiences, and we're often kind of in these bubbles where it's just like, I mean, you can even see me in my classes. It's just like me talking at a screen and I'm like, I hope they like me. So yeah, let me, if I could get the slides pulled back up, that would be great. Okay. So here we are in the kind of next portion of what we do here at Radar. You know, we come from a long line of protests. As you in Portland know, anti-fascist protests have been going on for decades. And so one of the things I have here is a little bit of a slideshow kind of going through some history before we head out. And then I'll open it up in the comments to questions that you might have for me, our audience, or even just about anything. You know, the astrology of today. You want me to pull an oracle card? We can do whatever y'all like for a few more minutes because we've still got some time here. But yeah, so I'm going to read a bit of this, let you know what's up, and then ask a few trivia questions, figure out what our winners are going to get. There's only 3 of them, so it's like just get 2 or even 1 right, and you win a prize. It could be kombucha. It could be sex toys. Who knows? Like I said, I lived in Portland and got into a lot of trouble there, so I do have a lot of friends that owe me favors. And so we'll be figuring out whatever the prize for our trivia winner is, and either have it delivered to you via these folks, or figure out an arranged pickup for you to pick up whatever it is, wherever it is. So yeah, you know, following threats to the community by anti-LGBT politicians, very similar to what's going on right now. This is kind of why we do these talks, is to bridge past and present and kind of look forward to how we change this stuff in the future. The folks pictured here, some of whom I've actually met, which is really cool. And this is a street in San Francisco for context. They submitted a Pride Parade entry. And this was really queer at the time. This was a way of queering the Pride Parade without actually, you know, stopping the parade or doing anything. They applied for a legitimate permit and marched in the parade, but were a little vague about what they would be displaying. So what they ended up doing was they brought in photographs of Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Anita Bryant, and the Ku Klux Klan, and Idi Amin, known fascist of the era. And then they marched with them in the parade to kind of say, you know, we're not tolerating this. This is bigots on parade. You want to make fun of us? Well, we'll make you part of our gay community, whether you want to be or not. So, you know, I call it early trolling. I don't know how many internet people we have, but if you're on here, you're kind of at least an internet person. So this is one of the early kind of almost performance theater things, a queer stunt, if you will. Performed in 1977. This next group we have here, I've kind of blurred some of the parts that might not be showable on the interwebs for a college performance, although I'm sure you've all seen them or have them yourselves. But this is the Cockettes. The Cockettes were a ridiculous psychedelic hippie troupe, which had ties to the Pacific Northwest. A lot of people know them as like a San Francisco-based troupe, and they primarily operated out of the city, but they came from all over: Portland, Seattle, Olympia, Los Angeles, all over the West Coast. Sylvester, who we'll talk about in a few minutes, all kind of coalesced in the Haight-Ashbury during 1969 and kind of through the early 70s. So they were formed out of a group of mystics, artists, students who were kind of using like their resources as people who were having the ability to access more things because of their privilege, honestly. They were men, they were women, they were trans people, they were Black, they were Latina, they were all over. Predominantly cis white men, though. And they figured out kind of a way, and I mentioned them because it reminded me, every time I think about them and I see pictures of their house, it reminded me of all the houses I lived in Portland, is they figured out ways to use their queerness, because queerness at the time was considered a disorder and a disability. They all pled crazy, and they got, and I say that as someone who's mentally ill. So they all said they had mental illnesses, and started collecting government benefits and then dispersing them amongst each other. So this is early forms of mutual aid. Was they figured out that they could pool their government benefits to buy and lease houses, and then they could use their EBT benefits to feed each other. So there was literally an entire house composed of people who had volunteered to give up their EBT benefits as the communal kitchen. So all the food throughout like an interwoven network of houses was kind of circulated through these houses that volunteered. We'll be the food house. We'll be the medicine house. We'll be the free drag house. There was one house that was just a place that you could walk in and take whatever you wanted and leave. So next up, how could I forget? Part of the reason we're here, Valencia Street, is the women's scene here in San Francisco. Ironically, also very, very interwoven with the riot girl scene of Ole and Portland. A lot of riot girls were visiting or living when they did relocate to San Francisco, kind of during our queer arts renaissance of the late 80s and 90s. And so this is a map that was actually handed out to woman identified folks when they arrived. Is like, you want to know where the women's bathhouse is, you want to know where Good Vibrations, which is a sex store, is, you want to know where all these things is, welcome to San Francisco, sister, here's your map, come find us. So, a way of queer placemaking. And then Sylvester, who I mentioned earlier, Sylvester was, what can we say about Sylvester? Sylvester was, a disco dance pop phenom. Long before Lil Nas X was blowing the devil, Sylvester was flamboyantly himself. He came to the city in the late 60s, around 69, during the Summer of Love. He came up here from LA, and he performed alongside the Cockettes, and then eventually said, I'm actually Black, queer, and talented. I don't need these cis white gay men. Bye, y'all. And so he started performing on his own and became really well known for his falsetto singing voice, his amazing style. Here he is actually holding let's see what that looks like. Possibly a Coach bag, and definitely wearing Lacoste. And he's standing at the synth or keyboard here next to Patrick Cowley, who is the gay godfather of gay high energy dance music. So he's, credited honestly as the pioneer of EDM and synth and music like that. So he's someone who I always like to call forward, because you've definitely heard his music or music that's inspired by him. And he doesn't get a lot of credit because he died very early in the AIDS pandemic, because who doesn't want to fuck a DJ? So he contracted the virus very early and passed away young. These next two folks that I'm going to call in before we kind of get into the Q&A and other things like that is Tongues Untied, which is also located here. And that was an experimental documentary done by Marlon Riggs, featuring himself and Brian Freeman, Blackberry, who actually recently joined the Ancestors, Butterfly Williams, who is in the back scowling and looking very very tough, even though he is a yogi and an alchemist and a very sensitive man. His name is Butterfly, but scowling because they're all performing masculinity for the sake of the documentary. But yeah, they hoped it would, shatter the nation's brutalizing, ridiculous silence on the matters of Black specific queer violence that they were experiencing. The intersections of race, class, and sexuality were not being discussed, and they still aren't. And that's the interesting thing about this was made in 1989, the year after I was born. And this is still a question of we're having, people saying no fats, no femmes, no blacks in their profile. We call it gaysism, all these weird things. And then always with trans people pioneering everything. This is Wendy Carlos. If you've ever heard anything that's been made by a synth, a Moog, you can thank her. She is a trans woman who also composed The Shining and the Tron soundtracks and a lot of really cool, just weird music. You could probably find a lot of it at the record stores on like Hawthorne or stuff like that. But yeah, she's the grandma to the Moog. So as someone who loves music, I always like to call her in. And then I guess now we're going to get to these questions and then close out with some Q&A that you might have for our artists, and then we'll kind of roll out. So this first question, I'd like you to answer in the chat if possible. So this first question for our Portland students. Bay Area folks, if you want to answer, you can, but I don't know how I'm going to get you stuff in Portland in the Bay Area, and I'm not paying for that shipping. You're going to have to. So let's keep this to PCC students, or at least Portland locals. Okay, so in the 1970s, what did it mean for someone to trod the boards? Did that mean they were bartending or dancing at a gay bar? Did that mean they were working as a fashion model? Did that mean they were, a little too slow to drink their cocktail and they were clinging to their wine glass a little too long? Although from a harm reduction standpoint, there's never too long to cling to a wine glass. You can drink as slow or as quick as you want. But for the purposes of the questions. And then D, work at a gay newspaper. So these questions are up here. These answers are up here. Let me see in the chat. And I'm just going to do it by order of who rolls in. Whoever types in first and thinks they know the answer and has the correct answer, I will jot your name down. We will figure out how to get you your prize. Okay, so please post your answers in the chat. Here we go. In the 1970s, what did it mean for someone to trod the boards? And this is actually something I got from this little piece of gay history. This is one of my favorite books. It's very hard to find, but it's the Dictionary of Gay Slang. It's from the early, you can't see it, my background. Okay, so we do have a correct answer. I think that person is not local to Portland though. I see someone, hey Arnold, are y'all in Portland? Can I get a thumbs up or a yes? Because if you are, you might be our winner. Hey Arnold International. And if you are in Portland, my apologies. I have a friend who is named Sen who might be here that's in the Bay Area. But if you are not Sen, who is my friend, you have won. But if not, Hey Arnold might be our winner for that one. Because we got them. And if we don't get an answer, we'll see. All right, I'll move on to the next question. I'm going to screenshot this though. So I have the timestamps and the answers, so we can know things will be doing at least with a bit of diplomacy. So this next one is name one or both of the lesbian poets featured in this photograph. So either or, extra points if you can get both. Okay, so that is my friend. So yes, Sen, you were in the Bay Area. Thank you for playing. But no, so I think that one, yes. Okay, that goes to Ryan. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I think it's Ryan. It could be Rain. I don't know, but that's our winner. Okay, so if anyone for this next one could name one or both of the lesbian poets featured in the photograph. This is kind of a tricky one. I'll give you a hint. Will that maybe help? So the woman on the right, her initials are CC. The woman on the left, if you're into biting or vampiric things, you might be familiar with her stories. Those are really good clues. So I'll wait and I'll see if we have any answers. Anyone who knows these? It's funny because I bet our Bay Area people know them because one of them lives here in the Bay Area. I'm still giving you clues. Okay, so that's Rhiann. Okay, Rhiann, got you. Okay. Did I make these too hard? My apologies. Well, I'll still give something away if someone really wants it. Shoot PCC a message. And we'll do it based on that. The answer to these is on the left, we have Jewel Gomez, who's the author of the Gilda Stories, which way before Twilight or anything like that, was a lesbian vampire novel about a lesbian who kind of time travels and has all these sorts of adventures and runs with a bunch of wild women and does cool sapphic lesbian stuff. It's really, really an amazing, amazing novel. It just celebrated its, I think, 25th or so, or maybe even older anniversary a few months ago, last year, before we moved into the new year. And on the right, that will be Cheryl Clark. And Cheryl Clark is a lesbian poet. So we've got one more question, and then we will move into the kind of Q&A with our artist. And this is Monica saying, why have I not read these books? Well, yes, this is why I do this, is so you can read these books, because these are books by queer and trans people of color who you need to be surveying the material of. So this person is an ally of ours. This is someone who approached me through my work at Radar, actually, to ask me to do an accuracy read for their book. And that's one of the cool things about being a writer, is a lot of people think that, oh, like all my writing, like the only way I can have a job as a writer is, you know, standing on on stage and reading my poems. God, I wish that were the case, but that's really not the case. I do everything, you know, editing, you know, technical editing, writing, anything in the sun. Like if I can write it, I'll do it. And so Aida approached me because she was seeking out someone who was queer, trans, from the Bay Area, and both Black and Latinx. I am all of those things. So we collaborated on her work, which is now a banned book because of its content and a queer character being in it, because you know how them Republicans are. You put a queer person in it, they ban it. So the question is, this banned book's author's novel in verse features a non-binary character of color living in what West Coast city and neighborhood? If you know the answer to this, our Bay Area people are probably going to know it. Our Portland people might know it. Where are they? They could be anywhere. I'll give you the hint, because all these questions relate to the West Coast. It's on the West Coast somewhere. What West Coast city and or neighborhood? Also, if you can give me the character's name or even something about the book, I'd even give it to you for that, because a lot of people might not remember the neighborhood name, but at least the city is what we're looking for. If you haven't read this book, that's not a problem, but it's one I always like to kind of quiz people on, because we're just on this topic of banning youth literature. And I think a lot of people don't even know this book exists, and that's because it keeps getting banned from places. And so it's imperative that we kind of uplift this type of work that even if it's not for adults, can still be enjoyed by adults. I know a lot of adults who love this book because it's a book about, you know, someone coming of age while dealing with their gender dysphoria. So even if you aren't a queer youth, if you at some point in your youth, and not everyone does, but some people do, experience gender dysphoria, you relate to it, which is why I had a great time working on it. So if anyone has the answer to this banned book's author's novel in verse, character of color living in what West Coast city and neighborhood, you might not know it. If not, we can just pivot into our Q&A. So at this point, if possible, can I get our artists on camera with me in some sort of like semblance of a panel? All right, there we've got Denna, there we've got Baruch. We might not have Mia with us because it is, I think, past midnight or close to midnight, and they are on a tight schedule. But they will be accepting questions, and they will answer them by email. And we can definitely handle that if anyone has any questions for them. So now that we've got everyone back, I'm going to allow the audience to ask any questions they might have first. And then I have a few just really basic questions for you. And then we can let people enjoy the rest of their night. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to be here for this hour and a half with y'all. It has been so fun for us. This is our first time as you are the inaugural stop on our 25th anniversary tour. So it has been really cool to just be here and doing this with all of you. So yeah, I'm going to keep my eyes on the comments section, which is like something I never thought I'd say, because they always say don't read the comments, although I do read the comments. You learn the weirdest things about the world by reading the comments. That's actually a trait I got from a past Radar participant, Kevin Killian, who's passed on. He also had a lot of fun times in Portland, but he told me, because he had a whole poetry collection based solely on Amazon reviews that he wrote for products he had never used. So he created, an entire book of poetic Amazon reviews that he actually posted on Amazon for products he had never used and sometimes never even heard of. He would just click something randomly and write a poem. So, ooh, hey Arnold again, are you just trying to get everything? I think you might have Googled that in the time we had, because I had the book cover up there. I knew I should have covered up the title. But okay, so that might just be 2 prizes for Rianne. Okay, so do we have any questions? If I don't see any questions, do you artists have any questions for each other while we wait for any questions to come through?
I have a question for Baruch. How do you channel your humor through your work as someone who writes a lot of rage and grief? I'm really intrigued by how humor and like lightness and like cheerfulness shows up in your writing. Wondering how you access that.
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny. I was gonna message you about how to connect to my queer rage because I I loved your I mean, I also my favorite piece that you read tonight was when you were talking about your name and speaking with your father. That made me cry because, language is also a big part of my life and feeling disconnected from my homeland. That one really hit me in the heart. So thank you so much for that one, Dana. I connect to my humor because, just like any person who claims to be funny, it's a way to navigate my deep rage and sometimes sorrow, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but I feel like I grew up with a bunch of aunts and uncles who were comedians. Mexico is a land of cantinflas, and especially, both my parents come from very poor families. And so both of them are pretty funny, even though they never admit. But my favorite memories are, you know, big family dinners in Mexico, and then my aunts and uncles would start a joke off randomly. Who could tell the best joke? And often the jokes were about what a horrible week they'd had or how much it sucked being poor. My dad had a joke about how they were 15 kids, him and his brothers and sisters, and they would take one jalapeno and cut it into little tiny 15 pieces to make sure everybody had a little bit of jalapeno. And just, I mean, it doesn't translate well, but just jokes like that, like I grew up hearing. And also, it's my mother. My mother is the funniest person in my life. She could out joke me any day. And sometimes I post them on Facebook. People are like, damn, dude, your mom just burned you. And I was like, yes, she sent me all the vapor rub. And so I feel like I often will be on Facebook and I start writing something really angry. And then I remember, oh, I appear as a large bearded man. And so often even in life, like today, someone walked past me with their little kid, and the little kid was like, Daddy, look at him. He's so fat and gross. And instead of the parent having a moment to stop and be like, we shouldn't do things like this to his 5-year-old, the dad just went, I know, honey. How did he get so fat? It's so weird. And they just kind of walked past me. And part of me was like, am I going to go to prison for breaking this dude's skull in front of his child? No, I'm too soft and chubby. And old. And so usually if I write something funny, and on Facebook, if I write something funny, usually people go like, wow, calm down, Baruch. And so I'm like, well, I'm sorry, angry. Um, I'm 6'3" and I weigh 350 pounds. So anger usually gets policed, I feel often when, and also I understand what it's like to be around angry men and how that charges a room, how that changes a room, how that centers male privilege. And so I feel often I use humor to tap into my emotions, I guess. And so that's something I try to do with my poetry. But I feel like recently I've been trying to move away from that because humor does reveal the innermost truth, but I don't want it to turn into a crutch. So I've been trying to tap into my poems that aren't funny recently, which is terrifying.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Nefertiti. Nefertiti, I feel like you have this really amazing way of embodying a space and time that almost transcends time as you write. Like I feel like you have this really, really, I'm honestly kind of jealous of it, refined way of speaking in the now and in the not now. And I wonder, this is actually a question that I'm going to ask that was asked by the audience, is I feel like it's a lot of joy coming from a place of things that might not have been joyous. So what kind of brings your inner child the joy to write from those places of memory, of matriarchy and Blackness, and then these more visceral things like your body in the here and now?
So the reason why I tentatively titled my manuscript in progress the present is a small child is because there's a way that joyfulness commands you be present. And I think there's also a way that children are very present and demand presence. And so I think me tapping into, first of all, I think that I'm every age I've ever been and am going to be. And being able to tap into, I guess, like my inner child is really about, I don't know, like I've so, and I feel like I've had this conversation with you, Mason, before in another space, but I think so often um, people are just like, I gotta heal my inner child. I gotta, protect it. And I'm just like, my inner child survived. Everything that has happened to me has happened to my inner child. And so when I reached out to my inner child, she was just like, I'm good. And you can learn some things from me. And so for me, it's really been about just like embracing solitude, especially during, COVID. And not, I mean, there's forced isolation, and then there's what it means to like step into a space where it's just like, I'm going to fill this space with myself and lean into the feeling of being abundant, which is not something that, we always get to feel in our identities. So for me, really being able to like lean into solitude and rest has helped facilitate me being in conversation with the parts of me that are just like, so present and screaming and want my attention most. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too woo-woo, but
No, that was just the perfect amount of woo-woo. I was like, where are my crystals at? They're behind the computer. I actually know exactly where they are. I mean, we're all in crystal-powered devices, too. They're all crystal quartz-powered, all these devices that we're sitting on. So, yeah, yes, thank you. And I hope that answers your question, Sen. I'm going to pitch this next one to Dena. This is from Natasha, who you know. Natasha's asking us, do we think queer readers are more dramatic than straights? Are we dramatic?
I really wonder if there's like not dramatic, but more like theatrical. Like we know how to perhaps put on a show. There's been very, very many times where I've been at like an open mic and there isn't a lot to like engage with other than like the person reading their words off the page and not actually like embodying their words and like having it move through them. That was something that actually really struck me about watching Audre Lorde read. She memorized all of her work and would always read it from like, it felt like she was like speaking directly to you as she was performing. And that has always really struck with me specifically about performing poetry in particular. And I almost like feel ashamed to say this, but it's so ivory tower, but I also learned how to read poetry from like my undergraduate poetry teachers, and like having that sense of like, you don't stop at the end of the line, you keep going until the end of the punctuation. Like you're trying to remember what our ancestors were doing, which was reading stories to one another rather than sitting by ourselves, isolated, reading to ourselves silently. That's not how our ancestors engaged in storytelling and community. And so I really still feel connected to that. And I almost wonder if it's like perhaps a cultural thing as well too, for just like myself, and thinking of what you said, like Baruch as well, of just this sense of storytelling being a way that people would connect amongst like a shared meal. And I think it speaks to a lot more of like how perhaps otherness, not necessarily queerness, has a theater to it in a sense of performance, but also that sense of like, I want you to understand what I'm expressing so that you can also see me as a person and a human and can see the commonality between us.
Yeah, that is very much so the case. It's like the reason we do this tour show. This is a form I like to think of, what queer jesters and griots and traveling people did. Long before we had things like ivory towers, is we traveled by foot, carrying loots, fruits, and whatever the hell else we needed to kind of tell our stories. And that's why we're honored to do things like this. And I'm actually not seeing any further questions. So I think because we've all been on here a long time, we've all had a long day, and I'm sure people have busy days to get with. Tomorrow, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I'd like to thank PCC for having us, Nefertiti for joining us, Baruch for joining us, Dena for joining us, and Mia, who is probably meanies right now or sleeping. But yes, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for making sure we didn't have an empty first tour stop, which was my teeth falling out style nightmare that I kept having, was that it would just be us and I would be crying in front of everyone being like, I invited people, I don't know what happened. But that didn't happen, so now I get to sleep tonight. So thank you, everyone. Once again, we'll be signing out. It was a pleasure and a privilege to do this work, to share this work. Join us next year. Keep writing yourselves. Who knows? You could end up like me 10 years later after you're at PCC seeing this show, running this damn organization. So here we go. Everyone, have a good night. Thank you. Much love. Be safe. Be well. Take care of each other in love and queer community, not community, queer community. Everyone have a great evening.